السلام عليكم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين أما بعد. Thank you, Kulliyyah of Laws, my dear colleagues, for giving me this opportunity to be with you again after having left that Kulliyyah long time ago, 20 years ago. It's a long time, but it is like being among friends and colleagues. Many of the faces, of course, are familiar. Some were my students even, but they are professors, full professors. We have heard very informative, substantive presentations on Afghanistan, on Islam. And there is, my presentation will not be on specifics so much, but will try to engage on the realities of Sharia in Afghanistan. And what do we expect of the Taliban? The Taliban started their campaign in 2001 with two demands. One was that the Americans, the foreigners, must leave Afghanistan. And the second was that Sharia must be fully implemented in Afghanistan. Of these two, the first was valid. The second was, of course, maybe partially valid. Afghanistan has always applied the Sharia, unlike like many other countries, unlike Malaysia, for example, where Sharia law is not the general law of the land. In Afghanistan, Sharia is the general law of the land. And there are specific codes and laws like commercial codes, like civil servants codes and so on. But the general codes of justice are Sharia codes to this day. And Sharia law was also applied from time immemorial until the 1920s. Perhaps it was not codified, but after that, and during the times of since the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, Sharia law was written in usul namas, in qanun. There are about close to 60 laws of different descriptions, substantive, procedural, applied aspects of the Sharia, in court affairs. In 1976 and 77, the civil code, which is about 2,300 articles. This was a major piece of legislation. The Civil Code of Afghanistan in 1976 was the code, in fact, was a general law that covered all aspects of the Sharia. And there was a criminal code, more than 500 articles. Again, both of these are perhaps more than 95% based on Sharia. Although the experts, Afghan experts, will describe the Afghanistan legal system as a mixed, mukhtalat, that both the Sharia and also modern laws, some of them based on European legislation like the commercial code, for example. In civil servants legislation, they are based either on Egyptian precedent or French or others. So it is a mixed system, but in the major areas of the civil and criminal affairs, it is the Sharia that is the applied law of Afghanistan, but the Sharia has generally been written down. Before that, it was the ulama and judges who would apply the Hanafi fiqh according to the books that were well known, like the Hidayah of Al-Marghinani and one or two other books that were the Mujalla, for example, the Mujalla al-Ahkam al-Adliya, that was borrowed from the Ottomans, side by side with some Afghan laws. These were the substantive laws of Sharia that were applied in the courts of Afghanistan. And we had, of course, constitutions. Most of the 20th century and 21st, we had about 7 constitutions, very frequent. Every new regime came with a new constitution. It was like becoming a practice that a new regime must bring a new constitution. This is a bad conception, but that was how it was. Of these many constitutions, the one that took a long time, like about 12 months of deliberations, and then the 2004 constitutions took about 18 months of consultation, committee work, and preparation. So these last 2 constitutions are the kind of they become, they are difficult to replace. They are comprehensive and they are well established. The rule of law in Afghanistan includes both the Sharia and the codified laws outside the Sharia in commercial affairs, economic affairs, industry, etc., etc. The Sharia laws and the codified laws of Afghanistan are mainly based on the Hanafi fiqh. The people of Afghanistan are Hanafi followers, probably 99%, 98% probably. No, there are Shias. There are Shias, about 10 to 12% of Shias, but the laws legislation basically mainly based on Hanafi fiqh. Only in the last maybe 10, 15 years, the Shias have become more active, and they have brought some of their own laws in certain places, like 1 or 2 provinces of Afghanistan. Shia law is also applied. The court system applies. And it is now recognized if both parties or one of the parties are Shia followers, they may apply Shia law in the courts. This is part of the constitution. I was also a constitution commissioner, and a member also of the Constitution Review Commission of Afghanistan that then became the 2004 Constitution. The Hanafi fiqh, when it was not codified, there was this risk that placed in the hands of the mullahs and in the traditional minded judges, they were inclined to be hardliners, punitive, the kind of, make of Sharia, the kind of the applied aspect of Sharia, people, not people friendly, people unfriendly, the people, that kind of thing. Although the Afghan people, they have a perception of Sharia to be a preferable law for the country, to be a balanced system and so on, but given in the hands of these hardline people, they have sort of this hardline aspect. Now, in the last maybe 20, 30 years, we have two types of judges. Educated, modern educated faculty graduates, and those who come from the traditional madrasa backgrounds. Maybe some of they are now both maybe in equal numbers, but perhaps the traditional judges are still quite, in large numbers. And you have to work on it to make the Hanafi fiqh, apply for what it is and how it is. And the kind of the religious mentality of Afghanistan is that Hanafi fiqh is, must be applied. Their preference, I have heard people, even some of the faculty graduates, the faculty of Shariat, they would insist on Hanafi fiqh, but the laws of Afghanistan are mixed. We have borrowed from Maliki fiqh, we have borrowed from other aspects of the Sharia, and there is this kind of, legislation. When the Sharia is codified, there is this a mix, a blend that the Hanafi fiqh is, moderated to some extent. But now that we have the Taliban, our expectation, their own demands that we want Afghanistan Sharia to be fully applied, we don't know how do they define that demand more specifically, and how do they receive, for example. For the time being, they seem to be not applying the written laws of Afghanistan. There are, as I said, close to 60 or maybe around that laws, mostly based on Sharia, but some of them are other sources. Would they be applying the existing laws of Afghanistan that is it is a blend of text and context. The Sharia itself is open to influences, is open to the general custom, urf of the people. In fact, urf is a recognized source of the Sharia, and adaptation with people's lifestyle, like the Sharia applied in Ottoman Empire in 16th century is not the same as it is today. For example, the Mujalla that was in 18th century. Even then, the Ottoman society grew out of the Mujalla as well. They legislated and modified and modernized the Sharia. Now, what we do not know what are the Taliban version of full implementation of the Sharia. And for sure, they will apply Hanafi fiqh, but I would not be surprised if they brought the Hanafi textbooks back to regulate the code practices. That would be a backward step because in the last 80 years, legislation has brought aspects of Afghan experience, its development and its constitutional kind of regulations into the body of the Sharia. And these laws that are documented Sharia, these are not sort of pure Hanafi fiqh. So 3 areas now are in focus. People's expectation of the Taliban are with respect to the treatment of women's rights. And like my colleagues earlier explained in more detail, human rights and constraints on liberties, on civil liberties that the Taliban might try to compromise Afghanistan's tradition of rule of law in Sharia in blended form, and they may, by bringing the Hanafi text back to the code practices, they would be leaving out a great deal of good experience. And that will be a backward step. I think it would not be welcome by the modern educated strata of the Afghan society. And I think that maybe among the Taliban, was said that they are not a kind of, there are mixed influences among them. They may not also favor a total backward step and accept the kind of mixed experiences, but there is this worry that what would they actually make of the implementation of Sharia. If we go back to the Hanafi text, I think it would be a difficult experience for the justice system of Afghanistan. There is a lot of regulation, moderation, changes that we will be leaving them out. Sharia is also always applied in a mixed format, like side by side with the Sharia. The Sharia itself has the doctrine of siyasa Sharia allows the rulers to regulate aspects of law and government, and to that extent, in all countries, even in Saudi Arabia, they have this nizam and irada. You have rule by decree and written laws within the areas of the Sharia and outside, that this is accepted by the Sharia itself. Perhaps, there has been always, centuries ago, during the time of Amir Abdurrahman and his predecessors and afterwards, they issued decrees and they have issued a number of the judicial circulars. The Supreme Court in Afghanistan, the last 20, 30 years, have issued a lot of these Muttahidul Ma'al, or judicial circulars that regulate aspects of the Hanafi fiqh side by side with these laws. So these are the kind of, in Afghanistan, like in many other Muslim countries, in addition to Sharia, there has been this decree laws and other documents that regulated the Sharia. And the other is women's rights. How do they treat women? They have already said that girls are allowed to go to schools, but there are this segregation in classes and so on. Gradually, there are things that are coming out that are just the kind of existing experiences. Still, we do not know at this stage. It's difficult to predict what the Taliban agenda is. There is this international influence like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. They are all familiar with the mixed legal system. And I think the kind of, there is certain expectations from Egypt and other countries that the Taliban should not make of the Sharia, the hardline Sharia that was applied a century ago, but to be open to new influences. Our own expectation is also in line with that, and that women should, they have gained under the Constitution, the equality clauses of the Constitution grant women equal rights. And they do not mention these sectors like property, like work, like education, no, all aspects, all rights women have, they stand on the same footing as everyone else in Afghanistan. They should not be discriminated. But my fear is that this may come under scrutiny, whether the international opinion that is also addressing the Taliban in the direction of moderation, whether that will be, their pressure will be strong enough to keep the Taliban, on the moderate line. It would be good for the international community to engage with the Taliban. If you are alienating, if you engage with them, you inform them that these are our expectations, they will try to stand in line. Otherwise, if you alienate them, they are free to their own devices, and that is not what we would want to do. So it's best to engage with the Taliban, like my other colleagues already said. I think Afghanistan society will generally also be expecting moderation. The enlightened element in our society now is strong enough to generate an element of pressure that Taliban should not throw the good experience that we have gained not just in the last 20 years, but in the last 80 years, that Afghanistan, the gains that constitution and laws and rule of law and other areas, women's rights and education and so on, they must value these and preserve the best. If they don't, they will alienate themselves and would jeopardize their own future in Afghanistan. I think that I will stop at this, and I thank you for your attention. Assalamu alaikum.
Please kindly allow me to pose just a few relevant questions to our distinguished panelists today, Prof. Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali. The question would be, Prof, what would be the way forward for Taliban to get the international recognition, and also whether they will be having some kind of inclusive government which respect the human rights? And also, if let's say the Taliban is internationally recognized, definitely, of course, they will be having a place in United Nations, right, Prof?
I think to be committed to Sharia, it does mean commitment to the rule of law. Sharia is the law. But Sharia has been evolved and regulated over time, over decades in Afghanistan, and our expectation of the Taliban would be to move with the gains of on the constitutional front, on human rights, on women's rights and their standings. In the economy, there is a lot of, there is no effective government. The demand now is for them to engage and regulate the country's affairs that are now, we don't have effective government right now. There is a gap. That is, they must come out of this situation as fast as possible. And then not to think that they are free rangers, that they can make out of the legal system of Afghanistan what they think. No, we have worked on this for a century, and we have to observe and respect the gains. But there are other things that there is a lot of official corruption, for example. They were known for their the 1996 to 2001. And they did two good things. I think we know this. One was that they eliminated the opium cultivation and trade, and the other, they established security. People were, you know, everywhere there was full security after Taliban. If they do those things, and I expect that they will probably do the same. And now you said that Taliban of that time are the same as Taliban of now. I think that they would themselves, I have heard one of them, Suhail Shaheen, that we have made mistakes. We have learned by our experience, and we want to do better. Those are the kind of ideas that came out of. Suhail Shaheen was interviewed by Yalda Hakim, and he said this. I think this is their mentality, not just one person, that they need to change and move along with the people's experiences with the gains of Afghanistan. I think they are not really, they should not think that they can do anything they want. They must be a responsible government. A responsible government is that engages with the people. They said that they will have a 12-person council, a leading council, people, shura, that these people will be from different sectors of society. People thought that Karzai and Abdullah and one or two others will be sitting in this council. And they said that it will be an inclusive government, and by this expression, people thought that this is what is meant. But now we don't see any sign of engaging outsiders from they have not brought in anyone from outside the Taliban themselves. This must change. And I think that their definition of emirate is not preferable to republic. Afghanistan was an Islamic republic, and the aspects of this regime are defined in the constitution in 2004. As you said, in this constitution, there are 17 references to Islam, into Sharia. The first 3 articles commits the legal system of Afghanistan, in the country, in the people, to Sharia, to Islam, and to the Mu'taqadat wa Ahkam. Mu'taqadat, the belief system of Islam, and Ahkam, the Sharia. These are the commitments. And the Sharia is a part of, our kind of national experience, our part of history and current society. And this was a step backwards from republican to emirate. I think that was a better way of, bringing people and their voices into the government. They talked of certain things at the beginning, but even those things, they are doing different things. So I hope that as time goes by, that they will show themselves in better light and move closer to Afghanistan, the good things that we have known, and not to be backward in their actions and their methods of government. And I think one of my expectation would be that they accept the rule of law, the existing constitution and laws. Of course, we are open to some changes if they have better things, but they must accept the existing system and the rule of law.
Thank you so much, Prof. It's very much eye-opening for the way forward in Afghan affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of our roundtable discussion today, and thank you so much for your kind participation. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.